Well, hello, and thank you for joining us today, everybody. I'm Todd Baginski, and welcome to the May 2021 Power Apps Community Call. If you haven't joined us before, we do this every month on the third Wednesday, and our next call will be on June 16, 2021. And we always do it at this same time, which if you're watching live now, you know is 8 a.m. Pacific time. So during this call, we have a lot of fun with everybody from all around the world who's in the Power Apps. We learn the latest news and community contributions and what's happening with the land of Power Apps. We get to meet people from the product team at Microsoft who invent Power Apps, and they tell us about what's coming and give us technical deep dives. And we get to meet folks from all around the community, such as Power Addicts, MVPs, champions, just people who love Power Apps. And we have a good time sharing our knowledge with each other every month. So that's what we do here. And these are the folks who bring this to you every month. I'd like to give a big shout out to everyone behind the scenes here you don't see. As always, I'm joined by Charles Sterling. Chuck, how are you today? Yes.
I'm doing good, Todd.
Big hand for Chuck. Nice timing. And I'm Todd Baginski on the right there. And then we have Dana, Andrew, Heather, and Gabriel who help us out every single month, doing a lot of things behind the scenes to help edit the video and make it available after this, as well as promoting it before and after the call, making blog posts, etc. So it takes a team, and thanks to everybody. We also have another team that's part of this call right now, and they're in the chat channel as we speak. So again, just all kinds of different folks who have been recognized for their expertise at Power Apps, or maybe they just love Power Apps and don't have any recognition at all about it and just want to be here and share the love in the community. They're all in the chat channel. And if you have a question about Power Apps, you're blocked or you're new to it and you want to learn it, whatever the case may be, just put it in chat, and one of these awesome folks will help you out. So that brings us to the agenda for today's call. So in today's call, we have a little bit of everything. We've got building multilingual Power Apps here, and I'm looking forward to this because this was something I needed to do several years ago, and I took one pattern to do it, but Haniel is going to show us a different pattern to do this as well today. And his demo looks a lot cooler than mine did anyway. Then we're going to jump into using environment variables. This is a brand new piece of the Power Apps platform, and it works with Flow as well. And so Chuck and Reza are going to show us how we can use those environment variables inside of Power Apps and inside of Flows. Because as you all know, when we build Power Apps, half the time we're building a flow to go along with it. We've also got a ton to announce on news this month and community contributions, which we'll follow up after that. So let's get right to it. Haniel, thank you for joining us today. Coming to us from Canada. Welcome. And we're really looking forward to seeing what you've got with the multilingual Power Apps. I'll let you take it from here.
So very quickly, so my name is Haniel Croitoru. I'm based out of Toronto, Canada. I work for Protiviti. 4 times MVP. Been working with the Power Platform since its inception. Love doing it. Recently published a book a couple of years ago on Agile. If you know me and you're connected with me, great. If you want to connect with me, definitely reach out to me. If you don't want to connect to me, that's okay. I don't want to connect with you either ways. So today we're going to talk a little bit about multilingual. So what's the general premise of my solution? And there's a few things. One of them is simple management. So terminology may change over time, right? So for example, a company may rebrand itself, or certain aspects of what you have inside of your Power App, you want to rename it. So rather than having to open up all of your Power Apps and change it, it would be nice to be able to do it centrally. Reducing development, right? If you work for a multilingual company, do you want to rebuild the same app again and again just in order to change the branding? The answer is no. Promote expandability. So again, as you start adding more languages, and I'll show this to you today, ideally all you want to have to do is just add the language and that's it, nothing more required. Abstracting code from content. This is really, really important. So we've got our techies on the call. You guys are building the solution. Do you want to be bogged down with, hey, can you update this string? You know, I'd like you forget a character and I want to make a change. The answer is no. Ideally, technology will build a solution, and somebody like communications or marketing will actually own the content. They will own the text. and you want to give them the ability to manage it. And also creating consistency. I've seen this many times where an organization is going to build multiple apps that seem very similar, and then one dialogue may say yes, no, and then another one, which essentially does the same, will say, okay, cancel. So there's no consistency between the apps. And using my approach will actually give you that ability. So I'm actually coming from the SharePoint world. And before Power Platform ever existed, I was doing work in SharePoint. And SharePoint is very prevalent. Sorry for those who are Dynamics people or Dataverse people, but the reality is that a lot of business people are very familiar with SharePoint today. So I figured, let's use the SharePoint lists as the backend for these languages. So the way it works is there's two types of lists. There's what I call string labels, and they're just single entities or single labels. And then there's list items. So imagine you have a radio button, a drop-down list, something that has multiple values in it. And so what happens is you build an app, you connect that to the lists, and then that will pull the data for you. If you build another app, it's going to go to the same lists, and that's how you start creating the consistency. And so on and so forth. You're building more apps, and they all will connect to the same one. So if you had a very simple app that has a single label and a drop-down, the normal way that you would do it is you'd have a label and you give it the text parameter, which is, let's say, nom in French. And then if you want to have a color, you may have different list items, or you pull it from some sort of a catalog or somewhere. What I do is I actually use the lookups, and the lookups will go to my SharePoint list to pull information out and only give me what is relevant to me. Let me move over to the actual demo. So as I said before, I have two different lists. Come on. All right. So one of my lists is called actually, I'm going to go with my strings labels first. And the only thing I need to identify in my list is what is my app name. And that allows me to do filtering, so I don't have to load all of my labels into the app, only the ones I need. What is the name of the label? So that's an internal name I'm giving my label, and that's how I'm able to resolve it or give it some sort of a default value. What is the value that I want to display? And then what is the language? And that's really important. What you'll see here is that I'm only capturing 2 letters. Typically, when you look up a language, it has 2 letters for the language, a hyphen, and then 2 letters for the locale. So for example, I'm in Canada, so it's EN-CA. In the US, it's EN-US. Frankly, to me, English is English. I really don't care about the locale. So that's why I'm only looking at the language itself. The second list is the choice fields. Very similar. I have the app name. I have the control that I want to use. Then I have the individual labels, the language that I'm using, and I'm also adding a column for ordering. So it doesn't have to go alphabetic, or whichever way I enter them to the list, I can actually define the order that I want. Let's look at all this magic happen. So I have my app right now. You can see the language says it's English. So when I go to my Microsoft 365 settings, you can see right now my language, display language is set to English. If I were to go in here, I'm going to change it to Spanish. So I'm going to pick, let's say, Mexico. I'm going to select it. Okay, so now all of my user interface, everything will be in Spanish, or should be in Spanish if I refresh. There we go. So now if I go to my app, I'm going to refresh it, and you'll see that it's going to change from EN to ES. Okay, so it picked up my language as Spanish from my Microsoft from my settings, and now it gives me my English label, my English choice fields. I'm going to change it again. If you guys have any questions while I do this, feel free to ask. Let's make this a bit more interactive. So I'm actually going to go with a non-Latin language. And I'm going to refresh it now, again. And so I changed it to Hebrew right now, and Hebrew is a right to left language. It's picking it up. I could add a little bit more logic to say that, is it a left to right language or a right to left language? And based on that, do I want to switch my label? So I could have done that. I didn't do it in this case. But as you can see, it's picking up the labels here. If I wanted to go and add another color, I'm going to go to my choices field, and I have only one for Hebrew. So let me just go add another list item. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to say my app is your color. I can do whatever I want here. You will not know if it's true or not. And this is Hebrew. Okay, just as simple as that. Notice how I didn't have to go and change the app. I didn't have to publish, do anything else. All I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to hit the refresh button on my screen. It's going to go and load the app, and it's going to give me the extra value.
So I have a question I bet you some people are thinking. I know the answer, but I bet everybody would like to know it too. And I know you know it, but the question is you've demonstrated this in one web browser here. What about if you're running on a mobile device or a tablet device or a different web browser than this one?
No, oh wait, so it's not picking it up from the browser. The language is not coming from the browser. The language is coming from the Microsoft 365 language setting. Right, so once you set it, so if I were to go right now, yeah, so wherever I go, as long as my setting in Microsoft 365 is the same, it's basically just gonna pick it up on my phone. But if I have another 5 minutes, I can bring up my phone and show you. But trust me when I tell you that it uses my Microsoft 365 settings. Doesn't matter if I'm using the mobile app or whichever.
And the key is you're triggering off your 365 setting there. It's not a browser specific setting that you're triggering on.
That's right. So when you look at these, there's the Office 365 connector in the Power App. Once you use that connector inside of your Power App, there's an option for preferred language. And all I'm doing in my code literally is I'm saying, get me the preferred language, take the first two left letters, which represent the language, get rid of the rest. I don't care about the locale. That is the language that I'm then going to my SharePoint list, and I'm filtering based on what is the app name, what is the control name, what is the language that I'm in right now. If it finds something, so I'll use the call lease function. If I find something, then I display the value. If I don't find something, I'm actually very careful of putting the default as the label name, so that if I forgot to add something, I can actually go into my list and just add it. So if I go to my string labels, so you see, for example, I have welcome in English, Hebrew, Spanish, and I have another button. So I'm not going to quickly change this to German. So Deutsch. And I was thinking it would have Luis Fries here to correct me if I'm wrong. And so now if I refresh my screen.
You doing any caching of the data? Or are you getting it each page going to the SharePoint site each time you hit a page in the Power App?
So it's not every page, it's on the load, because typically you're not going to be changing labels every time you go to a page. It might change once a week, once a month. But the one thing that I haven't implemented here, but I'm looking to do, is the SharePoint list may have hundreds or thousands of labels. All I would do is I would do a single query to say, get me the single list item that has the most recent date. If it is newer than what's cached, that means that the labels have changed. Go and load them and then put them into the cache. If it's older, just use everything from the cache, and that would speed it up.
Perfect.
So you can see right here, I have German. I don't have anything listed here. So instead of the question marks, I would normally put the label name. But now if I just go into my list here, I'm just going to say, OK, I'm going to add one more language. I'm going to say EWT, welcome.
Hi guys, this is Janev. I also have one question. This is just a follow-up question that we had previously. So there are scenarios where users would prefer to have English language in the Office 365 settings, whereas they would like to change the browser language. Okay, so I just wanted to understand how will this design work if we go and change the browser language to, let's say, Spanish or any other language.
So this current design is based on your Office 365 settings. Right. For a couple of reasons. A, to make it consistent across where you use the app, because you can't know where it's going to be used. Like there was a question about different browsers. The second thing is if you wanted to start using the browser, now you have to make certain API calls to actually get the browser language, which you may have to start using like a, some sort of premium connection to do that. This is all running the basic SharePoint connector, so there's nothing special about it. And you're using the Office 365 connection to get the language.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so yeah, if you're using a mix of languages, it's going to go, this particular pattern is using whatever you have in your Microsoft 365.
Okay, thank you.
To finish it off, so I basically, right now, it was German. Imagine I was a marketing person, I went in, I was said, hey, we just purchased a company in Germany, let's add support for them into the app. Great. All you have to do is go get the labels and tell whoever's using the app, you can now start loading it in German, and then the information is going to appear for you. You can also use, for example, if you didn't want to just have a placeholder, you can say English is going to be the default if something is not found. That's pretty much it. Any questions? Sorry, there was an unknown user. Any reason not to use Excel? So yeah, so the reason that you can use Excel, it definitely works. But every time the language changes, you have to open up the app, you have to publish the app, do that, right? So that puts an onus on IT to do that. That's really the big reason of why I may choose to not use Excel. Can we see the code? How are we doing on time? Is it okay if we take another couple of minutes to show the code?
I think if you could just show maybe one how you pulled it for the on start, and then how you applied that, maybe that welcome label you had, that would probably be good.
Yeah, that's pretty quick. So I don't know if it's just me, but it seems very slow today, the service, or it's just the fact that I'm doing a demo that it's slow.
That's always how it works, isn't it?
Never fails.
So overall, this pattern is very simple though, right? You just need to add a data connection to your SharePoint lists and then call that connection in your startup, which I'm sure you're about to show us.
Yeah.
Get the data back and then apply it to the labels appropriately, right?
That's literally all it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and again, I mean, it's not like a huge wow, really complex architecture. But it really, to me and when I've done this for some clients, the biggest problem it solved was it was removing the onus of IT having to deal with all those little minutia, marketing. Hey, can you change this? Oh, can you change that? If anybody on the call who's marketing, I apologize. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the other marketing people. So if I go to the on start, so the first thing I'm doing is I'm picking up you can see right here, Office 365, I'm getting my profile, and as said, I'm getting the left two characters from the preferred language. If it's blank, I'm setting it to EN, and I'm assigning it to my to a variable called language, a global variable. And then I'm just loading my collections from the two SharePoint lists. So that's what's happening on start. So Todd, there's no reason to have to do this on every page. I do it one time when I load the app. And then if I go to the specific label, so if I go to...
And can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah, of course.
It seems, this is Chad Althouse. I was just thinking the question about changing the language, you could render a unique set of all the languages as an option set to choose from, and then set that local variable from that, huh? If you want to allow...
I could cache the yes, absolutely. I could cache the variable. Again, for me, it was in Canada, we were bilingual English, French. And at the time, the client said, we want to base it off of the service because they're going to be running in English or in French. Like that's how they're working here. So this was built for a specific use case. Changing a different language based on like a selector, absolutely you can do that. Nothing's stopping you from doing that. So this is kind of the sausage making. So anytime I have a label, right? So I'm doing a lookup against the string collection, and I'm saying find me a match where the title is equal to the name of my app, the label is equal to the name of the label, the language is equal to whatever I'm returning. And then if I'm using the callee, so basically if it returns nothing, I'm just going to display the label LBL welcome.
Fantastic. One line of code. Like we always see in the Power Platform.
Yeah. And then the rest is for a collection or a list, I'm just using a filter where I'm filtering again on the app name, the control, and then the language. And then I think the sort order is where I am. Where is it?
Awesome.
Oh, I don't have it here, but yeah, the sort order is just the other column. Anyways, that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you. Great demo.
Thank you.
I'm sure a lot of people will be going out to build one of those very shortly here. Next time you got something cool to show, let me know and come on back. I'm sure everybody would love to see such a nice demo.
Will do. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. So moving right along here, we've got Chuck coming up next to talk to us about the environment variables inside Canviz apps and flows.
So first of all, best wishes to Louise. She's not feeling good. I'm her last minute stand-in, and I'm sure I'm not going to do as good a job as her. So Louise, if you're listening to this and the recording, I hope you're feeling better. So me and Reza are actually going to take this as kind of a two-part series. The first part that we were going to look at, or Louise was going to look at, was kind of the edge cases that the implementation that we've given with environment variables doesn't exactly handle, but it's actually common enough. Matter of fact, the scenario that Todd gave me, it was actually an application he was working on. I won't tell you which application because I think he might be submitting it, I hope, is that he wanted to have an application that changed its behavior based on whether or not it's either for one team or another or from test to prod. And I actually heard it more of a configuration change than what Todd wanted to do. So what you're seeing here is an example of where this application starts. It goes out and figures out what city did the person that installed me choose that they were going to run this application from. And in this case, it was Seattle because that's where I'm based. And so it defaults to Seattle is rainy. But this is actually based on an environment variable that the application checks. In this particular case, it's actually looking at an Azure function and doing a switch, because if we go out and take a look at those environment variables, let's do that now. There isn't one for custom connectors or SQL. There's only one for SharePoint connectors. And actually, Rez is going to walk through the different ways of changing your application based on whether or not you're in test or prod. So again, I've got an email address here. I've got my settings here. How did we do that? Where do you actually get started? If you haven't taken a look at environment variables, I've gone out into the solutions view. And I've actually opened a solution called variables or fun or something like that. The variable solution, I think, is what it might be called. And what we're going to do is we're going to go out and choose add. And under more, you'll actually see that there's an environment variable. And what we're going to do is, oh, actually, I don't want to add a new one. Actually, I don't want to add an existing one. I want to add a new one. So we're going to go out and say add new. And I'm into fishing. If you guys didn't know that, I like fishing. So I might have a fishing environment variable. So maybe it's a fishing application. And if Eric Suave is actually who I see is working very diligently as a bass fisherman, he could go out and say this is a bass application. And I actually fish for tuna, so I would have the tuna application. And all the data that I see when I install the application would be about tuna, and Eric's would be about bass. So I would say that this is the fishing environment variable, and I spelled that one wrong. That's okay. And it's going to be text. We're actually going to look at the data source one for SharePoint a little bit with Reza. And I'm going to go ahead and say that my default value is tuna, and the current value is, what did I say, bass for Eric. Now, what this does is actually puts these values into a table in Dataverse called the data definition table. Now, there is also a related table that you're going to want to pull the values out that did not get populated until we actually do a change. So let's go ahead and actually go out and edit this and change that. Let's actually maybe say that I changed it to a salmon because salmon's getting up. So that's actually the default value. And the current value isn't going to be bass, but Eric is actually out chasing trout. Actually, Eric's a diver, so he's going to be looking at groupers. So we're going to be grouper. Now, how do I use that inside of my Power Apps application? right? I showed you here is where I'm going out and grabbing this stuff from this environment variables. Let's actually go ahead and hide this. Now, first of all, I'm not looking at this, but there's a setting called automatically create environment variables. Rez is going to show you that in a second. Now let's actually just delete this box. What I've got here is the bottom table. Actually, let's just delete these. Actually, I think I have one that they don't exist in. Let's see if I have one. No. Okay. And this is actually called the environment variable. So we can actually go ahead and delete this. And let's just say I want to see what environment variables I have. So I go ahead and add a data table and move this down. And remember I said that these are actually all based on definitions out of that Dataverse instance. So if I go out and take a look at the data source, and you can see that I've got the environment variable definitions. And here are the environment variable values. So it looks like I got it swept around. That's okay. We'll just delete this one, and we'll actually put that one back in there. And they're related in that there should be a row, once you've modified it, for a value based on the definition. And that's what I'm doing here is I'm actually pulling it out and saying, hey, I want this particular row, whatever that value is I set in the solution, I'm going to pull that out. Again, we're doing this the hard way because what the team is working on is enabling a metaphor in PowerFX language where I can actually just reference the value name itself. So that's actually what we're working on, and it'll make it a lot easier, and you won't have to go out and bind directly to these Dataverse tables. Okay, and actually I need to delete this one. And actually go out and add the correct one. And you can actually just see how they're related behind these definitions. So itself, we're going to go ahead and add the table. And in this one, it is the values. And now you can see that I've got more values. Sorry, I have fewer values than I have of definitions. This is what I was talking about earlier, to where I actually would not see a value until I actually change that definition. Come on, I want you to work with me. There we go. Okay, so here the definition, here are the values, and here's that email address that I see here. And this is actually where I'm using the weather, which is actually set to Seattle. And of course, I can override that. Now, how am I actually doing a switch on an Azure function connection endpoint? What I'm doing, and I know that this isn't the bestest practice, I've gone out and said, hey, let me pull out the weather variable, and then based on if it's Seattle, again, you'd probably want to use a case statement, not an if statement. I'm going to go ahead and use the Seattle Azure function. And if it's not, well, it looks like I got it backwards. Anyways, I will use the Key West one. And you can go out and see when I run this, that if I actually toggle this, I am then calling them the different Azure function. But the application starts by default with what was actually set in the environment variables. So here's a quick look at lots of ways you can use environment variables, both for configuration and for ALM deployments, right? So this email address can certainly be different for test versus prod. And a lot of it is actually kind of custom for Power Apps, Canvas apps. And what Rez is going to show you is what does the mainline scenarios look like that don't require a lot of code, and actually the functionality is built in. Before I do that, what you're going to actually see Reza doing, he actually has a video on it, so make sure and check out his YouTube channel. And Matthew Devaney actually just did a great blog post last night walking through how to actually set up those SharePoint environment variables. So with that, Reza, I'm going to hand the microphone to you, my friend.
Thank you. And I will take over screen sharing.
Perfect.
Hello, everyone. This is Reza Dorrani. I'm going to showcase how we can leverage environment variables in the context of flows. However, I will also show you how we can leverage those environment variables in apps. I know Chuck showed that, but I plan to cover the new data source environment variables option. So to start using environment variables, and there were a lot of questions in chat, do I need solutions? The answer is yes, you do need solutions. Solutions is a premium feature. The answer is no, solutions are not premium. As long as you have a database created in your environment, which requires capacity, if you have that, in that case, all you need to use solutions is access to that environment. If you have the access, you can start building solutions. You do not need premium licensing. It's a misconception. Okay,
So right here in my default environment, I have gone ahead and in the interest of time already pre-created a solution called help desk. And the way you create a solution is just go to new solution, give it a name, select a publisher, a version number, and just create it. And that's exactly what I did. It's just a shell for adding components. For folks who are new to solutions, it's a shell where I can add components in, components like apps, flows, bots, you name it. Now, as part of this solution, what I'm trying to create here is a help desk kind of an application. And in my scenario here, my data source is SharePoint. Now, anyone here who's worked with SharePoint needs to understand that SharePoint is not environment specific. SharePoint is tenant specific. So when I build a SharePoint site, that site is going to go in my tenant. It does not sit in an environment. So many a times we come across scenarios, and specifically application lifecycle management, you want to build something for test or in dev, move it to test, and then move it to production. Now we have environments in the Power Platform, which gives us those capabilities. However, the issue with SharePoint as a data source is SharePoint is not environment specific. So what we end up doing typically is we create these multiple SharePoint sites like I have done right here. I have a SharePoint site and check the URL, service desk test. And as part of this site, I have a list called tickets in which I have some columns that I have just added. I also have another SharePoint site called service desk. This is acting like my production SharePoint site that I have created. Now, when I create apps and when I create flows and when I point to those SharePoint sites, when I move across environments, what I have to do is when I move from dev to test or prod, I have to go back and create all the connections again. I have to move the pointer of my SharePoint site from my test site to my production site. And that's a lot of work that you got to do after you have deployed your solution. So let me try and move this piece out of here. Okay, so let's see how we can leverage the new capability here called environment variables related to data sources. And this only works with SharePoint today. So I'll go back to my Power Apps and I have a solution here called Help Desk. In here, I will go to New, select Environment Variable. And this is where I can create a brand new environment variable. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call this my Help Desk Site URL. And under data type is where you can select 5 different options here to choose from. And this is the type of data that's going to be maintained in this environment variable. Chuck showcased earlier how to use text variables. You have JSONs, so you can actually store JSON blobs here and read it in your apps and flows, decimal numbers, Boolean values. But the newest addition to the environment variable type, which is the most interesting aspect here, is data source. Data source, once again, only and only works with SharePoint today. So if I select data source here, it is asking me for the connector reference, which is only SharePoint. So I'm going to select SharePoint. It will ask you to provide a connection. I already have a connection in this environment, so it's pre-selected. And as part of this data source environment variable, you have 2 parameters that you can select. You can either connect to a site or you can connect to a list. So if you're connecting to a list, which could also be a library, by the way, you have to first create a site connection, and then you got to create a list connection. So I'm going to start with the site connection here, go to new value, and this will list out all my SharePoint sites, and I'll quickly pick my test site right here, and I will click save. And just like that, it just creates an environment variable that is associated with my test SharePoint site. And this environment variable is being packaged as part of this solution. So you see, solutions, help desk, here's my variable. Now I need a second variable to point to my list as well. So I'll go to new, go to environment variable again, which I cannot find. Okay, right here. I'm going to call this my tickets list URL. Once again, I will pick data source, connect to SharePoint, parameter list. This now will first ask me to choose the site parameter because a list is a part of a site. And here I will pick my previous environment variable that I just created, help desk site URL. And once I click this, it will now ask me to connect to my list. and it will list out all the lists and libraries as part of that SharePoint site. And I have two. I'll pick my tickets list. I'll click save. So I've created two environment variables of type data source, one pointing to my test SharePoint site, one pointing to my test SharePoint list. Now let's see how we can use these in apps and flows. Chuck showed you how you can read them in apps, and it was quite complex. You saw that, right? He wrote that formula for filter and look at those tables and grab that information. There's a lot of work to do. In flows, the Power Automate team has made it extremely simple. So I'll go to new, and let's say I'll create a flow. And I'm doing this all live randomly. There's nothing planned here. So if anything goes wrong, it's okay. So I'll select when a new item is created. Okay, so whenever a new item is created in my SharePoint list, I want to notify my user that an item has got created. That's my flow. Now under site address, what we typically do is we open the drop down and select a site. But this time we'll do something different. I will open this and go to enter custom value. When I do this in flows now, we have this option called environment variables, which is available as a dynamic content. And this will list out all my environment variables. So I just created one called help desk site URL. So I'm going to select this because that's my site URL. And then for the list URL or the list name, once again, I'll go to enter custom value. That's the key here. And here I will pick my tickets list URL. That was the second environment variable that I created. So two environment variables, help desk site URL, tickets list URL, and that's exactly what I have here. This now is connecting to my data source, which is SharePoint, through those environment variables. Now that I'm done with this, let me try and do two things. One, I will update the item again. And once again, to update the item, I will again pick enter custom value. This time I'll go very fast. Help desk site URL, enter custom value, ticket list URL. Give me the ID of the item you want to update. Fill out any mandatory fields. I did practice this. That's why it's fast. All right. How do I change? So check this out. It's connecting to that action, which is update item, but it is still aware of all the columns in that list. So let's say whenever a new ticket is created, the status is new. When the process begins, the status becomes in progress. So I'm updating the item. And now right here, I will send an email to myself if I can get the action right. All right, send an email to Reza. And I'm going to say item is created. And right here, because I want to also show you the values of those environment variables, I will use it in the subject of my ticket. And in the body of my ticket, I will put the tickets list URL. And I'm going to call this my item created flow. I'll click save. My flow is created and now associated as part of that solution. So that's how easy it is in flows to leverage environment variables. Once the flow is saved, the flow is ready and the flow is listening. Listening to what? Listening to any item that is created in this site, in this list. So let me go to the test site and create a new ticket. It's my standard SharePoint list, nothing special here. I'm going to say I have a connection issue. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to enter that information and click save. If I go back to my flow and wait for the flow to run, it can take up to 30 seconds. Once the flow triggers, we will see that I will receive an email because I use that notification component in the flow. And that email will contain those environment variable values because I actually posted them directly through my flow. So that's how simple it is for us to leverage it. Now, while the flow is running, I'll promise I'll show you that. Let me also show you how we can use these same environment variables in apps, data source variables. So I'll go to new, I will go to app, and I will create a new Canvas app. And looks like I received the email. So check this out. Here's the email, that item is created. Check the URL. It's coming from that environment variable. And this, what you see here, is the list URL, the GUID of the list in SharePoint that is stored in the environment variable. So that's the power of environment variables. If I package this solution and I move it from one environment to another, I can then repoint these environment variables to my production SharePoint site, and all my apps, all my flows that are pointing to those environment variables will automatically transform themselves to that new data source. That's the power of these variables. The environment variables that I leveraged in my flow, none of this requires premium licensing. Please bear this in mind. All of this is free. As part of your standard license, you can use all of this. The demo that Chuck gave earlier, where he was querying the data verse tables in Power Apps, that requires premium licensing. That means through flows, I can get it for free, but through apps, I have to pay a premium cost. Reza, how do I avoid that? Well, I have a trick. You can trigger a flow from Power Apps. So why not call flow from Power Apps, grab all the environment variable values and send it back to Power Apps. So you don't have to pay the licensing cost. Anyways, so in Power Apps here, I'm going to create a new app. I'm going to call this my help desk app. Just creating a header here, nothing special. And in order for me to leverage environment variables in Power Apps, very important, go to advanced settings in the app and search for environment. And here there is a new feature that you need to turn on, wherein it automatically creates environment variables when you're adding data sources. Only SharePoint is supported today. So I'm going to turn this on. I'm going to go back. One thing to bear in mind is it won't reflect immediately. You have to go and save the app once. So I'm going to call this my service desk Power Apps CC app. I'm going to save this app. You have to do this. You have to save it once. So the app is saving. I know I have only 2 minutes. I'm going to try and speed up. Come on. All right. So the app is saved. You have to close it. Go back to my solution. Here is my Canvas app. This time I will go and edit this app again. And this is where we will see the changes. So I'm going to open this app up. All right, here's the app. This time in my Canvas app, if I go to data source, if I go to add, and if I try and add SharePoint as a data source, looks like my speed is too fast for Power Apps. Okay, so I'm going to select my connection. Now, typically this lists out all your sites, or I can plug in the URL, but here is a brand new option now that opens up called Advanced. If I go to Advanced, this will list out all those environment variables that I can choose from. And this is free. There's no premium license required in Power Apps to do this. So right here, when I go to Advanced, here is that environment variable that I created. So I'm going to select this. This will list out all the lists in that SharePoint site related to that environment variable. Don't pick the list here. Once again, go to Advanced and pick the list URL as well from your environment variable, which in my case is right here. So I'm not using direct connections. I'm going via the environment variables. I'm going to click connect, and this now will add that connection for me right here. And because this is connected to my test SharePoint site, if I go and insert a very simple gallery out here and connect it to my tickets list, I shall see all those 3 ticket options right here. And these are all coming from my test SharePoint site. Once you're done with all of this, you've built your app, you've built your flow, you've built your solution. All you have to do now is package this and export this. 2 tips. When you're exporting solutions with environment variables, specifically the data source ones, you have to do this. You have to go to that environment variable, which I'm doing right now. Go right at the bottom, and you see the association to current site. Remove it from the solution. You have to remove it, otherwise you won't be able to associate it back in the new solution. So just remove it from the solution, not from the environment. So I'll pick remove from the solution, and this is done. I'll do exactly the same thing for my second environment variable as well, which is my list environment variable. I will come here and say remove this from the solution. This is done. I am ready to move this. I'll click on export. I'll click next. Ideally export it as a managed solution for production environments. I'll click export. And now Power Apps is in the process of packaging all the artifacts that you see here, my apps, my flows, my variables. It's going to package it all together and give me a zip file that will be available in my downloads folder. And all I have to do next, once I get that package, is I have to move over to my production environment, go to import, pick that zip file, bring it in. And the moment I bring it in, it will ask me for the URL to that new SharePoint site and the new SharePoint list, which I will be pointing to my production one. So that's the concept and power of environment variables. And I think that brings it close to my presentation.
Well done, Reza.
Thank you.
Great job, you and Chuck, building on top of each other today for that. Look at all that applause. I think every single person on the call is clicking it. You guys really knocked that one out of the park. Well done.
Thank you.
That is one of the best things I have seen hit the Power platform in the last year. I'm very excited about this. It's going to make rolling things out much easier in the future. Okay, that brings us to the ending portion of our call here today. So, where can you all learn more about this? Well, we have all these great places where you can go learn more about Power Apps and different things from the community, training resources, samples, videos, etc. So we encourage you to check all these out. Some recent news here. Chuck, I'll let you take this over here today.
Yeah, so if you haven't seen the blog post, the Power Apps Demo Extravaganza is actually getting kicked off again. The submissions were actually open 9 days ago, and we actually have two different ways that you can actually enter, as a component or as an application, and you can enter as a team. Those are some big changes, and it's going to be super exciting. Also, I went out and did a quick URL for Matthew Devaney's blog post on how to walk through what Reza just did. So Matthew Devaney's got a walkthrough, and that's the link that you can find through the PA variables walkthrough. Reza and Daniel Christian both have videos on it as well. If you are actually into looking at robotic process automation training, Kent Ware just updated the training 2 days ago. So you can actually grab that from the RPA in a Day package. And also, it's one of those blog posts that I think a lot of people may have missed, but there's actually the CAT team did a adoption maturity model where you can go out and figure out how are we doing, how are we tracking, what's the next steps. It actually dovetails back in the COE that they actually have done. So if you haven't taken a look at that blog post, it goes on, and actually the wealth just keeps coming. It's kind of like that ALM one that Casey did. So if you actually haven't looked at that ALM blog post that Casey, Manuela's maturity model and Casey's are the two that you need to read for the week if you actually can read two of them. So Todd, back to you.
All right. That's great. Yeah, lots of great things there. Oh, yeah, again, about the Demo Extravaganza, this is what Chuck mentioned. Entries have already started, so look forward to seeing what everyone brings to the table on that one. And I'm excited. I'm working on an app with a couple folks myself right now for the Extravaganza. We also have Aiko Mendoza is putting on the Spanish Biz Summit. I encourage you to go check that out at bizsummit.es, and that is on June 4th and 5th. Lots of great Power Apps content there that you can watch all day long. And
me and Reza are going to do a 400 or 500 level on environment variables. So I'm actually going to walk through the ProDev ALM piece of this, where we can actually do tokens, actually do a programmatic replacement. So if you thought what I did was kind of complex, like Reza said, just wait. You're gonna need your boots on for the next session at the Business Summit. So Eichel, thank you for actually inviting us and letting us present. Todd, back to you.
Right on. So we'd like to bring April in here for a second. This is a new segment that we're adding to the community call every month. And last month, April, Matthew, Hero, Geetha, I'm trying to remember everybody's name, came on and showed us the new PnP Power Platform samples contributions. And so April's going to be coming on, or maybe Hugo, each month and telling us about what was new in those samples. So April, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, so I just wanted to shout out and thank you to everyone who has contributed to the PnP Power Platform sample repo. We had so many great contributions, from Power Apps templates to component samples to custom function samples, which I'm super excited about. We have a ton from lots of people on this call, like Matthew Devaney and Geetha and Hero and Laura and Cameron and Derek. Who else I'm forgetting? Penn. So tons of great samples out there. If you have anything, custom function samples or components or app samples, anything like that you'd like to contribute, just go to aka.ms/power platform-samples, and we love to show what you built and highlight that on the calls too.
That sounds great. And April, those are 100% free to use and plug into any app you want, right?
Absolutely, 100% free. We curate, we vet the samples, get them submitted. We have that link will take you to our sample browser, where you can easily explore the samples, and all you have to do is download the MS app file to start using them.
Can't get much easier than that. Awesome. Looking forward to seeing what you tell us about next month and which new ones have hit. Does anybody in chat have any questions or anything like that?
Actually, I see that Jamie Melissa Rose, who recently nominated as an MVP, congratulations on that, asked a question about licensing, and Karsten Goth, who is a global black belt for Power Apps for Microsoft, has actually kind of responded back to him. So Karsten, did you want to actually unmute yourself, or could I talk to you and unmute yourself and do a quick explanation of what a Power Apps per license is? I know that this is actually kind of your day job, so you would do a better job than myself. Karsten, are you on the call? I know he's on the call. Does he have a microphone?
Absolutely.
Karsten,
I am.
Go ahead.
Hi there. Yeah, so the question is about the per app licensing, and obviously it's around these struggling points of when is a per app licensing coming into play. Regarding the example given with that 1,000 users, for instance, that you need. So first of all, what you need to understand is that a per app license is assigned to the environments, which means if I do have 1,000 users, which should basically be able or be capable to use that specific applications, you need 1,000 app passes as capacity inside that specific environment where you're hosting this specific application. The other confusing point is sometimes raised by customers in terms of what is these two use cases, right? The two use cases, and say you do have for instance, a model-driven application, and you do have a Canvas application. So what's the combo of these kind of things? So the combination can be any. So it can be two Canvas applications, it can be two model applications, or it can be one Canvas and one model-driven application that can be used under the per app licensing. Hope this answers your question and stops a little bit around the confusion part. Otherwise, let me know.
Awesome. Thank you, Karsten. And that's a perfect example of if you need some help, reach out in the chat and someone will give you an answer. All right. That brings us to our section about this Power Apps community that we're all part of. This is awesome. I'd like to say thank you to everybody who's sharing their knowledge with that hashtag PowerAppsCC for this call, Power Apps community call. Here's our monthly awesome word art of everybody who's tweeted that. And the more you tweet it, the bigger your name is in the world here. So that's a lot of fun, and just goes to show you how many people are involved in this. If you need help about Power Apps, this is a great hashtag to use on Twitter as well to reach out. The other great hashtag to use is the Power Addict hashtag. And so the Power Addicts have a call much like this every month as well. You can learn more about that at wearepoweraddicts.com. There's also Donna and Sarah's Less Code, More Power series. You can find that on Channel 9, and they have shorter videos than what you'll find here, usually with just one guest, and it lasts anywhere from like 10 to 15 minutes. So if you're looking for more deep dives on awesome Power Apps things, check that out too. So finally, we would all just like to say thank you. Again, we have so much fun here every month. And keep your eye on Twitter. Chuck and I are going to continue to put more surveys on there about what do you want to see, other ways to adjust the call and make it even more fun. This call will be recorded, and it'll be on the Microsoft 365 Developer YouTube channel shortly. We'll see you all next on June 16 at 2021 at 8 a.m. again. I'd like to give another thank you to Haniel, Reza, and Charles for taking the time and effort to put those great demos together to show us all these cool things today. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.